The key hung from a frayed piece of yarn. It scraped the deadbolt, followed by a heavy click that echoed through an entirely empty house. No one was waiting inside. The only sound was the muffled laugh track of an afternoon cartoon spilling from the living room television. A backpack hit the faded linoleum floor. Small hands reached for the stove dial, turning it until the electric burner glowed orange. There was no adult coming home for hours. Just silence, a hungry stomach, and a cold skillet. This wasn't cooking. This was childhood survival. Millions of American kids lived this exact afternoon every single day. Out in the quiet stretches of the suburbs, where the lawns were manicured but the houses were empty, an entire generation learned to feed themselves. It felt like absolute freedom, but underneath, there was a quiet, lonely resilience. They weren't making gourmet meals. These weren't recipes passed down in fancy cookbooks. These were survival stories written in processed cheese and canned soup. Today, we are opening the vault on 25 forgotten after-school suppers that latchkey kids made for themselves in the 1970s. The meals that kept a generation going until mom's headlights finally flashed across the driveway. You think you know what they ate, but you don't. The dish at number 14 was a desperate attempt to cook a real family dinner, and the meal waiting at number 1? It is a memory so universally heartbreaking, it defines the entire era. Before we uncover the truth behind these plates, hit that subscribe button. Because once the food industry figured out what these kids were doing, they spent millions to erase it. Let's start the countdown. Number 25, the everything sandwich. Sometimes called the Dagwood, inspired by that old Blondie comic strip. This wasn't a recipe. It was an excavation. You opened the fridge and stacked whatever was staring back at you. Cold cuts, leftover meatloaf, American cheese, random pickles, squirts of mustard and ketchup. There were no rules because there was no adult supervision. Nobody was standing there telling you what went together. It was pure, unadulterated liberation between two slices of bread. Today, a modern deli calls this a build-your-own artisan sandwich and charges you $15. Back then, it was free. And it was built by a 9-year-old standing in the glowing light of an open refrigerator. Number 24, the tuna sandwich. The smell was unforgettable, but it was the taste of independence. Canned tuna was a pantry staple. You grabbed a can of chicken of the sea or Star-Kissed, drained it in the sink, and mixed it with heavy spoonfuls of mayonnaise. No cooking required. At 35 cents a can, it was a cheap protein that made a kid feel oddly grown up. You slapped it onto some bread and ate it over the sink, so you didn't have to wash a plate. Today, you go to a downtown restaurant and pay $20 for ahi tuna tartare. It is the exact same fish, just a different tax bracket. Number 23, beanie weenies. A Depression-era survival tactic that carried straight into the latchkey decade. You took a can of Van Camp's baked beans, sliced up some hot dogs into little coins, and heated them together in one pot. Sweet, salty, heavy, and incredibly filling. The entire meal cost about 60 cents. It was the ultimate comfort food when the empty house felt too quiet. Today, a French bistro serves you a dish of beans and sausage, calls it cassoulet, and charges $28 for the privilege. Your 10-year-old self made the American equivalent on a Tuesday afternoon while watching cartoons. Number 22, white bread pizza. This is what happened when a kid desperately wanted pizza, but the freezer was empty. You took a slice of Wonder Bread, smeared it with ketchup, topped it with an American cheese slice, and threw it in the toaster oven. You watched the cheese bubble. It was resourcefulness born of pure desire. Today, a hipster cafe puts tomato confit on artisanal sourdough, calls it flatbread, and charges $16. Same concept, different universe. Number 21, bologna and cheese roll-ups. When even making a sandwich felt like too much work. You laid a slice of Oscar Mayer bologna flat, put a Kraft cheese single on top, added mustard, and rolled it up. No bread, no plate. You ate it standing there in the kitchen. It was an act of pure pragmatism. Today, a restaurant arranges cured meats and cheese on a wooden slab, calls it a charcuterie board, and charges $25. A latchkey kid just called it a snack. Number 20, beans on toast. When the fridge was truly barren, the pantry always had a can of Van Camp's or Bush's baked beans. You heated them up in a small pot and poured them over a piece of heavily buttered white toast. Carbs and protein for almost nothing. It was the meal when the money was tight before payday. It was heavy, warm, and silenced a growling stomach immediately. Nobody talked about the lack of ingredients. You just ate what was there and survived. Let us pause the countdown for a brief moment. There's a very specific reason you stopped making these meals, and it was not because you suddenly lost your taste for them. It was because of a deliberate, calculated shift in society. The American food industry realized that 15 million latchkey kids were feeding themselves every single day using basic, cheap ingredients. That was a massive financial problem. True independence does not generate corporate profits. They needed to sell you a subscription to survival. So, they completely changed the landscape of the American kitchen. In the year 1971, exactly 1% of homes had a microwave oven. By 1997, that number exploded to well over 90%. The appliance itself was not the enemy, but it became the perfect Trojan horse for an entire industry of highly processed, overpriced convenience foods. They aggressively marketed to busy, exhausted working parents across the country, selling them the dangerous lie that convenience was the ultimate form of love. They convinced American mothers that leaving a kid with raw ingredients was highly irresponsible, but leaving them with a frozen, sodium-packed box was entirely safe. In 1983, Hot Pockets hit the freezer aisles. By 1988, Lunchables appeared in grocery stores everywhere. Suddenly, the fundamental skill of heating a skillet, buttering bread, or boiling noodles was entirely eradicated from the culture. The food industry weaponized the guilt of the working-class family. They packaged the exact same cheap ingredients you were already using, wrapped them in bright plastic, and charged your parents triple the price. They stole the independence of an entire generation and replaced it with a permanent dependency on massive food conglomerates. You simply did not just forget how to cook those after-school meals. The culture systematically programmed you to stop doing it forever. The corporations looked at a generation of children who knew how to fend for themselves and decided those survival skills were a threat to their bottom line. They deliberately monetized the empty house. They capitalized on your lonely afternoons. And in the process, they wiped out a beautiful culinary tradition built on pure, rugged resilience. When you look back at what you used to make, do not view it with embarrassment. View it as the last era of true, unmonetized childhood independence, before the massive food corporations took over the American kitchen completely, leaving you with absolutely nothing. The silence of an empty avocado green kitchen was never an accident. It was the direct byproduct of a fracturing American economy. In the 1970s, stagflation violently gripped the nation. The minimum wage in 1975 was a mere $2.10 an hour. It simply was not enough to survive. Between 1,960 and 1,980, the American divorce rate doubled. Women's participation in the workforce skyrocketed from 43.3% to 57.5%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Parents were forced to work longer, harder, just to keep the lights on. That meant millions of children came home to the echoing thud of a front door closing behind them. They sat on shag carpets in front of curved televisions, bathing in the artificial glow of Gilligan's Island or the Brady Bunch, making meals that masked a profound, quiet loneliness. Number 19. Cereal for dinner. This is the ultimate confession of a latchkey childhood. You poured a bowl of Frosted Flakes as the sun went down. It was not a meal, it was a surrender. One kid from a Reddit forum remembered it perfectly, pouring way too much sugar into a bowl, collapsing into a sugar coma, and riding a skateboard until dark. It was the meal you ate when you were too tired or too lonely to pretend you were cooking. Number 18. The TV dinner. Swanson or Banquet. At 98 cents a box, this was the premium experience. You peeled back the foil and stared at the segmented aluminum tray. The compartments kept the corn away from the potatoes and the turkey away from the dessert. Those rigid aluminum dividers were the perfect metaphor for the era. Everything compartmentalized. Everything separated. You ate it alone, tray on your lap, letting the television replace the warmth of a family dining table. Number 17. Saltines and peanut butter. A sleeve of saltine crackers and a jar of peanut butter. You sat at the counter and ate the entire sleeve, simply because nobody was there to stop you. No adult was standing over your shoulder telling you to save some for tomorrow. It was a meal born of absolute, unsupervised freedom, which is often just another word for isolation. Number 16. The microwave quesadilla. A single flour tortilla, a handful of shredded cheese, folded over and microwaved until it turned into hot rubber. It was, objectively, the worst quesadilla ever made. But you ate it anyway. It was hot, it was fast, and it filled the hollow void in your stomach while you waited for the heavy rotary phone on the wall to finally ring. Number 15. Hamburger Helper. Introduced by General Mills in 1971 for 59 cents a box, it was designed to stretch a single pound of ground beef during a brutal economic crisis. But for a latchkey kid, it meant something entirely different. You dragged a stool to the stove, browned the meat, and stirred in the powdered cheese. You were not just feeding yourself. You were trying to have dinner ready for when your exhausted mother finally walked through the door. It was an act of profound love. disguised as a box of processed macaroni. Number 14. Sloppy Joes. Hunt's introduced Manwich in 1969, and it quickly became a working-class staple. Opening that can and pouring the thick, sweet sauce over cheap ground beef made a 12-year-old feel like the head of the household. You piled it high on a cheap bun. It was messy, heavy, and made the house smell like someone was actually taking care of you, even if that someone was just you. Number 13. Cup noodles. Nissin brought cup noodles to America in 1971, charging just 25 cents. You boiled water, poured it to the fill line, and waited 3 agonizing minutes. Sometimes you sliced a hot dog into the styrofoam cup. At 10 years old, adding that single hot dog made you feel like an absolute culinary genius. It tasted like absolute victory. Number 12. Fried bologna. You dropped a slice of Oscar Mayer bologna into a hot, dry skillet and watched the edges curl up into a charred, crispy cup. You slapped it onto white bread with a heavy smear of yellow mustard. The sizzle of the meat hitting the pan was the soundtrack of blue-collar pride. Number 11. Poverty nachos. A handful of tortilla chips spread across a paper plate, covered in Velveeta cheese, and thrown into the microwave. The cheese melted into hard, oily plastic on the edges. You ate them on the couch, licking the grease off your fingers, lost in the afternoon reruns. Just a kid waiting for the sound of a car in the driveway. We need to stop the countdown right here, because history has lied to you. For decades, psychologists, media pundits, and society at large have spoken about American latchkey kids with a heavy dose of pity. They painted a tragic picture of neglected children, wandering through empty suburban homes, damaged by the sudden absence of their working parents. They looked at the demographic statistics and called Generation X the broken generation. But they were completely wrong. You were not a victim. You were an accidental genius. Consider Julie Lythcott-Himes. She served as the freshman dean at Stanford University, one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the United States. When analyzing her own success, she stated it plainly. I was a latchkey kid. She walked home alone in the 5th grade, locked the front door, and managed her own existence. She explicitly argues that this exact latchkey independence, the absolute necessity of figuring out how to survive the afternoon, built the critical, resilient life skills that heavily supervised modern children entirely lack. The academic world eventually caught up to this stark reality. Psychologist Deborah Bell spent years studying the after-school lives of these children. Her conclusion shattered the societal panic of the era. She documented that being left home alone was actually a better alternative than staying with babysitters or older siblings. Some children even experienced a profound sense of fun and capability in managing their own time. In 1991, a buried study was released that completely destroyed the latchkey stigma. It proved mathematically that these unsupervised children did about as well socially and emotionally as youngsters receiving constant adult supervision. As long as there was a coiled telephone cord stretching across the kitchen to contact a parent, your development was fully intact. You were not a suburban tragedy. You were a master of your own environment. When you stood in front of an avocado green refrigerator at age 10, analyzing the caloric potential of leftover cold cuts and a single egg, you were practicing high-level problem solving. You were building a permanent infrastructure of self-reliance. You are the toughest, most fiercely independent generation this country has ever produced, simply because no one else was coming to do it for you. Let's get back to the food that kept you alive. We have reached the end of the line. These final 3 plates are not about basic nutrition. They are not about culinary excellence. They were something much deeper and significantly more profound. When you were standing in a freezing kitchen in the middle of a brutal Midwest winter, staring out the window at an empty driveway, waiting for a car that was not coming anytime soon, these meals were your only true companions. They were the silent guardians of a forgotten American childhood. They were a warm, desperate hug served on a cheap paper plate. Let us look closely at the final 3 dishes that defined a generation. Number 3. Hot dogs. You filled a pot with tap water and boiled it on the stove. You dropped them in. A package of hot dogs cost exactly 69 cents. You took them out, placed them on a plain slice of white bread if there were absolutely no buns left in the pantry, and you ate them in total silence. And then you did it again the very next day, and the next. One latchkey kid recalled eating 2 hot dogs after school every single day for the entire duration of the 6th grade. It became such a mechanical, unbreakable routine that he could not look at a hot dog again for a full year. It was not just a meal. It was the strict, monotonous rhythm of daily survival. It was a caloric anchor keeping you firmly grounded to reality. You ate it because it was there, it was fast, and it meant you had successfully made it through another solitary afternoon without an adult in the house. Number 2. The English muffin pizza. The sun was slowly going down. The house was growing increasingly dark and quiet. Getting a hot pizza delivered cost $4 or $5. That was a massive, unjustifiable expense for a struggling, dual-income family trying to survive the economic pressures of the decade. So, you became an architect of your own joy. You split an English muffin down the middle. You spread cheap jarred tomato sauce over the porous surface. You added shredded mozzarella, or simply a ripped piece of an American cheese slice. You slid it into the glowing heat of a toaster oven. You watched the cheese intensely until it began to melt and bubble fiercely. That specific meal cost exactly 25 cents to build. It was not merely an afternoon snack, it was a pure manifestation of childhood pride and independence. You literally engineered a miniature version of a luxury you could not afford. You created something incredibly beautiful out of absolute scarcity. You were not deprived. You were incredibly resourceful, building your own happiness from scratch. Number 1. Cinnamon Sugar Toast. We have finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle of the entire Latchkey experience. It is the fundamental meal that connects 15 million isolated children across the country. You took a slice of cheap, white Wonder Bread. You dropped it into the toaster. While it was still smoking hot, you spread a heavy layer of butter across the top, watching it melt instantly into the warm crumb. Then, you sprinkled a thick, gritty mixture of white sugar and ground cinnamon. Some kids put it directly under the hot oven broiler to watch the sugar caramelize into a razor-sharp, crunchy crust. It was universally known as poor man's French toast. It cost exactly 5 cents a serving. It was the very first thing you ever learned to cook all by yourself. It was sweet, it was hot, and it filled the freezing kitchen with the smell of absolute comfort and total safety. Today, the modern grocery store sells you Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal in a brightly colored cardboard box for $5.49. But the massive food industry cannot package the real feeling. They cannot package the quiet, undeniable resilience of a 9-year-old child, standing completely alone in the fading twilight of a suburban kitchen, feeding themselves with nothing but bread, sugar, and sheer, unwavering determination. You survived the severe loneliness of the era, and this was the legendary childhood meal that proved it. These meals were never just about cheap ingredients. They were about human dignity. They were the physical manifestation of keeping yourself alive and retaining your humanity when the world around you felt completely fractured. And today, history is quietly repeating itself. The economic dread has returned to the American kitchen. In 2026, grocery inflation is crushing the working class once again. Food at home prices are predicted to rise 3.1% this year alone. 62% of everyday consumers are deeply concerned about simply affording their basic grocery bills. Families are scrambling, budget cooking, and trying to stretch every single dollar, exactly like your parents did in the 70s. But there is an even darker, more poetic irony at play here. The latchkey kids of the past are no longer children. Generation X is now 50 to 60 years old. Many of you are becoming empty nesters. You are facing an incredibly quiet house once again. You are returning to the exact same situation you started in all those years ago. You are eating alone. You are cooking for one. The silence of the kitchen has fully returned. But this time, you do not have to be a victim of the modern food industry. You do not have to rely on their expensive, processed subscriptions for your survival. You already possess the ancestral knowledge of how to make something out of absolutely nothing. You learned it when you were 9 years old. So, here is my challenge to you for this week. I want you to reject the convenience trap. Do not order a $20 meal from a delivery app. Do not microwave a plastic tray. Tonight, I want you to walk into your kitchen and cook one of these original meals. Make a steaming bowl of butter noodles. Make a hot plate of cinnamon toast. But do not eat it standing over the sink. Do not eat it slouching on the sofa in front of the television. Sit down at the actual dining table. Turn off your smartphone. Sit in the quiet reality of your own home and eat your meal very slowly. Honor the incredible resourcefulness of the child you used to be. Acknowledge the permanent survival system you built with your own 2 hands. And when you're done, go down to the comments and tell me exactly what you cooked. Tell me about the meals that kept your family alive. Share your memory, because this knowledge does not belong to the massive food corporations. It belongs to us. It is our history. The industry wants you to believe that you need their colorful boxes and their expensive monthly delivery fees to sustain your daily life. They desperately want you to remain a passive consumer who has entirely forgotten the rugged skills of your own childhood. But you are not a helpless customer. You are a survivor. And it is time we finally took our kitchens back. Start cooking your dinner right now.